The lake behind my cabin wasn't just water, it was memory. Every morning it shimmered like a living photograph of my father, who taught me to cast a line when I was barely old enough to stand steady on the dock. Each ripple carried echoes of laughter, and the misty dawn whispered stories of patience and quiet peace. For 15 years I'd fished there, never disturbing a soul. The locals called it Silver Elm Lake, though it didn't have an official name. The elm trees leaning over the water shed their leaves like coins, and in those golden reflections, I found home. That peace was something I never questioned until the letter arrived. It was folded neatly, printed on expensive paper with a gold seal that smelled like authority and arrogance. The homeowners association, whose territory began half a mile down the road, somehow believed their rules stretched this far. My father's cabin stood on land he'd purchased long before those modern houses even existed. But bureaucracy has a way of pretending history doesn't matter. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Henley, it has come to our attention that your continued fishing activities at Silver Elm Lake are causing environmental disturbances and setting a precedent inconsistent with our community guidelines. You are hereby requested to cease all fishing activities effective immediately." I laughed. Couldn't help it. It was the kind of absurd laughter that bursts out when life suddenly feels like a bad play. I crumpled the letter, tossed it onto the table, and thought no more of it. The next morning I did what I always did. I packed my old green chair, my rod, and my cooler box, and walked down the path to the lake. The air smelled of pine and sunlight. When I reached the dock, the world was still. Just birds, breeze, and water. I cast my line, leaned back, and watched the reflection of clouds drift by. Then came the sound of heels on wood. A woman in a sharp purple suit was walking toward me, clipboard in hand. Behind her, a police cruiser rolled up near the shore. The officer who stepped out looked hesitant, like he wasn't sure what he was supposed to be doing. "Mr. Henley," the woman called, "you are in violation of a direct order." I turned my head slowly, keeping my voice calm. "Order? You don't have authority here, ma'am. This is private land." She smiled tightly. "The lake is shared property. Your actions affect our community's ecosystem." "That's funny," I said. "I didn't see your community care much when they dumped fertilizer runoff here last summer." The officer stepped closer. "Sir, maybe just what?" I interrupted. "Let her claim the water now too? Next, she'll tell me the clouds are HOA property." The woman's smile thinned. "You're on notice, Mr. Henley. Continued noncompliance will result in penalties." I held up a fat trout, its scales glinting in the sun. "Tell your board I've been catching fish here since before your fancy houses were built. I'm not harming anyone." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." She turned sharply, her heels clicking away across the planks, perfume lingering in the air like a threat. The officer gave me a look halfway between pity and apology before following her. I thought it would end there. Didn't. 3 days later, I noticed something wrong. The water smelled different, chemical, bitter. When I cast my line, nothing bit. The fish that surfaced were sluggish, their movements unnatural. The next morning, 3 dead fish floated near the dock. Their bellies were swollen, their eyes glazed. I picked one up, and the stench hit me. It wasn't decay, it was poison. That's when I knew someone had done this deliberately. I called the local environmental office, but all they said was, "We'll look into it." A week passed, nothing happened. Then one night, just past midnight, I saw headlights flicker through the trees. A black truck stopped near the far shore. 2 men climbed out carrying large containers. They walked down to the water's edge and poured something in. I grabbed my flashlight and ran shouting toward them, but they bolted. The truck roared off before I could catch its plate. When I reached the spot, the grass was dying, and the air smelled of chemicals. The next day, I went straight to the HOA office. Clara Morgan, the woman in purple, was waiting behind her desk like she'd been expecting me. "Mr. Henley," she said sweetly. "What a surprise. Someone's dumping poison in the lake," I said, throwing a dead fish sample onto her desk. "And if I find out it's one of your people?" "Please," she interrupted, smiling. "That's quite an accusation." Maybe it's just natural die-off. Ecosystems can be unpredictable. You think I'm blind? I've lived here my whole life. She sipped her coffee without blinking. Then perhaps it's time to adapt, Mr. Henley. The community prefers a more controlled environment. I could see it in her eyes then, the satisfaction of power. To her, this wasn't about rules or nature. It was about control. I left before anger got the better of me. That night the lake was silent. No frogs, no crickets, nothing. Even the air felt heavier. I sat on my porch staring at the still water and realized I was watching it die. Over the next few weeks, signs went up around the lake. No fishing, contaminated water. Private property, HOA monitored. It felt like watching someone put a lock on your childhood. Then, one afternoon, while walking along the far edge, I noticed something I hadn't before. A small concrete building barely visible behind the reeds. Pump house. Pipes ran from it straight into the lake. I remembered hearing the HOA brag about their eco-friendly irrigation system. They drew their water directly from the lake. I froze, realizing the irony so sharp it almost made me laugh. They'd poisoned the very source of their own water. I didn't say anything yet. Instead, I started investigating quietly. I sent water samples to an independent lab a few towns over, paying extra for rush results. When the report came back, my suspicions were confirmed. Dangerously high levels of copper sulfate, nitrates, and solvent residues. It wasn't natural contamination. It was a deliberate chemical dump. Still, I needed proof of who did it. I bought a small wildlife camera, the kind hunters use, and hid it in a tree facing the pump house. For 2 nights, nothing happened. On the third, my patience paid off. The footage showed 2 HOA maintenance workers unloading barrels marked algae treatment compound and emptying them into the lake. I took the evidence straight to the local police. It was the same officer from before. He watched the video and frowned. This doesn't look good. But these are HOA-approved contractors. They claim it's for algae control. I slammed my hand on the desk. Algae control doesn't kill everything that breathes in that water. He sighed. I'll talk to them. But be careful, Mr. Henley. People with money play by different rules. That night, sitting alone on the dock, I realized how deep their arrogance ran. People who poison nature for control always believe they're safe from the consequences. But I knew better. The pump house fed directly into their community's water system. They thought they were punishing me for fishing. They didn't realize they were poisoning their own lives. And soon they would learn. Because nature always remembers who harms her. The morning everything began to turn was gray and heavy. The sky low over Silver Elm Lake, as if even the clouds had grown sick of the poison floating beneath them. For the first time in months, I woke up with something close to hope, because the proof I'd gathered was solid, undeniable, and I decided to bring it somewhere bigger than the local police. I sent the footage and lab reports to a regional environmental agency, attached every picture I'd taken of the dying fish, the corroded reeds, the strange barrels. I included a letter too, written in the simplest language I could manage. This is being done by the Silver Elm HOA. They are killing the lake. Please stop them before it's too late. Then I waited. A week went by. Then 2. Nothing. I called the number on the agency's website, and a tired-sounding clerk told me my report was under review. When I asked how long review would take, she said, "Depends on our backlog." Meanwhile, the signs around the lake multiplied. No trespassing. Contaminated water. Keep out. Violators will be prosecuted. I couldn't even walk along the shore without one of the HOA guards watching me from a distance. Camera phone raised, recording me like a criminal. But they couldn't stop me from seeing what was happening to them. It started subtly. The fancy lawns that used to glow emerald green began to turn yellow at the edges. The ornamental flowers in the roundabouts wilted. A few weeks later, neighbors whispered that the tap water in their kitchens smelled odd, metallic. Kids complained of stomach aches. By mid-May, a small panic was spreading. The same woman who had once ordered me off the dock, Clara Morgan, was now pacing her own backyard with bottled water in hand, barking orders into her phone. I could see her from across the lake, still immaculate in her pressed suits, but the confidence in her movements had changed. It wasn't power anymore, it was fear. I didn't feel triumph. Not yet. Just a deep ache that it had to come to this. I'd grown up believing that kindness was the better weapon. My father used to say, "You don't win by hurting back. You win by showing what hurt really costs." That thought kept me steady. So instead of vengeance, I began documenting everything again. But this time not for the authorities. For the truth itself. I created a small online page, nothing fancy, just a quiet blog called Silver Elm Speaks. I uploaded photos of the lake's condition, side-by-side comparisons from before and after the poisoning, and small journal entries about what it meant to lose something sacred. First, no one noticed. Then a local high school environmental club found it. They shared it on social media. A few outdoor journalists picked it up. Within 2 weeks, it went viral. People were furious. Comments flooded in. Who poisons a lake to stop one man from fishing? Shame on whoever did this. Protect Silver Elm. And then, someone leaked a memo. An internal HOA email chain where Clara herself approved lake cleaning measures, despite warnings from contractors about toxicity. It spread like wildfire. The story hit local news. I'll never forget the day a reporter showed up at my cabin. She was young, polite, and serious, with a camera crew behind her. "Mr. Henley," she said, "is it true the HOA poisoned the lake to stop you from fishing?" I looked at the dead fish floating near the dock, then back at her. "You can call it whatever you want," I said quietly. "But yes, that's what they did." The next day, Clara's picture was everywhere. HOA leaders scrambled. Lawyers released statements, and emergency crews began testing the water. The official report finally confirmed what I'd known all along. Dangerous levels of copper sulfate and chemical runoff, introduced through the HOA's irrigation system. But the irony no one could miss was this: those same pipes carried water straight back into their community supply lines. The very system meant to beautify their lawns had poisoned their homes. The lake had been their mirror, and now it was reflecting their own carelessness back at them. Still, I didn't celebrate. Couldn't. Watching the fish die, seeing the trees pale along the banks, it didn't feel like victory. Felt like loss. One afternoon, as I was collecting another round of samples for the cleanup crew, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Clara. Gone was the polished confidence. Her suit looked wrinkled, and the circles under her eyes were dark. She hesitated a few feet away, clutching a bottle of water. "Mr. Henley," she said softly. I didn't answer. She tried again. I wanted to apologize. The words fell like stones between us. "For months," she went on, "I thought I was protecting our community. I didn't listen when the contractors warned us about overuse. I didn't listen to you. I thought you were being defiant for the sake of it. And now," her voice cracked, "half the neighborhood's water lines have to be replaced. Gardens are dying. People are scared." I studied her for a moment. The lake behind us looked dull and tired, the surface filmed with green decay. "You didn't just poison a lake," I said quietly. "You poisoned trust." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I know." We stood in silence. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said finally. "But if you're willing, I'd like your help restoring it. We're starting a cleanup initiative and—" I laughed once, not cruelly, but with disbelief. "You want the man you drove off his own dock to help you fix what you broke?" She didn't flinch. "Yes, because you're the only one who actually cares about this place." I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to remind her of the letter, the police, the humiliation. But my father's voice echoed again. "You don't win by hurting back." So I nodded, slowly. "All right," I said. "But we do this my way. No more chemicals. No shortcuts. We heal it properly." Relief crossed her face, followed by something genuine. Gratitude. Maybe. From that day forward, I worked with them, not for them. We brought in biologists, volunteers, and community members who had once been strangers. Kids came to plant reeds and oxygenating grasses along the edges. Elderly residents brought sandwiches and water. At first, the progress was invisible. The lake remained gray, lifeless. But after weeks of cleansing and oxygenating, tiny signs began to appear. Dragonflies hovering, minnows darting near the shallows, the faint smell of clean water returning. Every small change felt like a heartbeat returning to something I loved. The irony was that people who once mocked me for living in the past were now learning the same lessons I had grown up with: respect, patience, humility. Clara came often, trading her clipboard for gardening gloves. Sometimes she'd sit quietly near the dock, staring at the water. We didn't talk much, but there was understanding in the silence. The lake wasn't just healing the ecosystem, it was healing us. Still, not everyone wanted peace. A few board members accused Clara of weakness for apologizing. They claimed I'd manipulated the narrative to make her look guilty. They wanted the restoration project stopped, fearing it would cost too much. So one evening, at a community meeting, Clara asked me to speak. The room was full of murmurs when I walked in. Some faces were hostile, others curious. I placed a small jar of lake water on the podium, clear, clean, living water from a freshly tested sample. This, I said, holding it up, is what's possible when we stop treating nature like property and start treating it like a neighbor. You can write rules, you can post signs, but you can't own a heartbeat. This lake belongs to all of us or none of us. Silence filled the hall. Then, slowly, people began to clap. It wasn't thunderous, not dramatic. Just a steady, honest sound, like rain returning after drought. That night, as I walked home under the stars, I felt the first true peace I'd known in years. The battle wasn't over, but something had shifted. People had begun to care. When I reached the dock, I sat down and dipped my fingers into the water. It was cool, alive again. I whispered to the dark surface, "You're coming back, old friend." And in the faint shimmer of moonlight, it almost seemed to nod. By late summer, Silver Elm Lake had begun to breathe again. The algae had thinned, dragonflies danced across the water, and the first clear reflections of clouds shimmered where there had once been only poison. I'd started waking early again, not out of duty, but out of quiet joy. Watching the mist rise over the water each dawn felt like being forgiven by something older than time itself. But healing, I'd learned, isn't just about clean water or living fish. It's about people, their hearts, their choices, their ability to face what they've done and still decide to make it right. And not everyone was ready to do that. One evening, as I was cleaning my fishing gear, a black SUV pulled into my driveway. The same kind Clara used to drive, only newer, shinier, colder. A man stepped out, suit pressed, smile professional in that way that hides teeth more than shows warmth. "Mr. Henley," he said smoothly, offering a business card I didn't take. "I'm representing the Silver Elm Homeowners Board. I'm sure you're aware of recent tensions." "Tensions?" I asked, leaning against my porch rail. "That's one way to describe nearly killing an ecosystem." His smile didn't fade. "The board feels your involvement in the restoration project has been somewhat overstated in the media. They'd like to move forward with a new narrative. Something more neutral, less emotional." "Neutral," I repeated, almost laughing. "You poison the lake and nearly your own drinking water. There's nothing neutral about that." He sighed, looking around my modest cabin like it was something he could someday bulldoze. "We can make this simple, Mr. Henley. Step back from the project. Stop posting updates. In exchange, the HOA will offer compensation. Generous compensation." It was my turn to go quiet. "You want to buy my silence?" "Not silence," he said smoothly. "Just discretion." I stepped forward until my boots met the edge of his polished shoes. "Tell your board I'm not selling my conscience. You people already traded yours for convenience." His smile flickered for a second, then returned, thinner now. "That's unfortunate," he said, turning back toward his car. I'd hoped we could end this peacefully. The way he said peacefully chilled me more than I cared to admit. After he drove off, I found a note tucked under my cabin door. No signature, just a single line written in block letters. "The lake isn't yours to save." I should have felt fear, but I didn't. Anger burned steadier than fear ever could. The next day, I went straight to Clara. She looked exhausted again, but stronger in spirit. The woman who once ruled with arrogance now carried herself with humility and something like courage. "They're trying to push you out," I told her. "I know," she said. "Half the board blames me for their reputation, the other half blames you. But the funny thing is, none of them are willing to stand by the lake and face what they did." "What do you want to do about it?" I asked. She looked out the window toward the water, where volunteers were planting reeds in the shallows. "I want to show them what truth looks like when it refuses to drown." That weekend, she organized a public gathering, a community event at the lake. We called it Day of Renewal. People from nearby towns, reporters, even school groups came. Children painted signs with slogans like, "Water is life," and "Protect Silver Elm." Standing on the dock, I looked over the crowd and saw something I hadn't seen in months. Unity. Not HOA versus outsider. Just people. Families, neighbors, strangers, all wanting the same thing. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't bring notes. I just looked at the lake and let the words come. "You all saw what happened here," I said. "You saw what greed can do when it forgets that nature doesn't belong to anyone. But you also saw what forgiveness looks like when people decide to care again. We can't erase what was done, but we can choose what happens next." The wind rippled through the crowd like a quiet cheer. After the speeches, Clara stood beside me as volunteers released small buckets of native fish back into the water. Her eyes glistened, and for once, the smile on her face wasn't political. It was human. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on this place, or on me." I nodded, my throat tight. The lake's teaching all of us the same lesson. You can't heal something by pretending it was never hurt. You have to face the wound. The next morning, the man from the SUV returned. But this time, he wasn't smiling. He stood on the opposite bank, watching as local news crews filmed the cleanup. When he saw me looking, he turned and left. The board resigned the following week. Clara stepped down as president but stayed on the restoration team as a volunteer. The state environmental department took official control of the project. For once, it wasn't about politics. It was about balance. By early autumn, the lake was alive again. Frogs sang at night, fish darted near the reeds, and the reflection of the trees stretched clear and endless across the water. I rebuilt my old chair, set it back on the dock, and brought out my rod again. Not to fish, but to sit. The simple rhythm of the water lapping against the wood was enough. One afternoon, a group of neighborhood kids came running down the path. "Mr. Henley, look!" they shouted, pointing. Near the shallows, a mother duck was gliding with her ducklings, the first in nearly a year. Their tiny bodies cut ripples through the clear water, sunlight catching their down. I felt my chest tighten with something wordless. Relief. Maybe gratitude. Maybe both. Clara arrived a few minutes later, out of breath. When she saw the ducks, she laughed through tears. "We did it," she whispered. "We helped," I corrected gently. "The lake did the rest." She smiled and nodded. "It forgave us." We stood together, silent except for the rustling of trees. The water shimmered like polished glass, and for the first time since all this began, I saw it the way my father had shown me. Alive, infinite, patient. As the sun sank behind the pines, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the poison, the anger, and how it all led back to this. The undeniable truth that kindness is not weakness. It's the strongest force on earth, because it survives everything. I cast my line one last time before dusk, not expecting to catch anything. It wasn't about that anymore. It was about giving back the ritual, the memory, the love. The reel hummed quietly. The lake rippled once, then stilled. And for the first time in a long, long while, it felt like the world exhaled.